Okay.
All right.
Hello. This is the 3rd of February. Happy birthday, my father, who says he doesn't watch these because we're boring.
Did you really say that?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
My parents are very, very blunt when it comes to these sort of things.
That's great. I remember my dad, when we were filming episodes, my dad told me, he was like, "You're not a very good actor." I'm like, thanks, Dad.
But the nice thing, I was thinking about that because my dad read my last book and he was like, "Oh, it was very good, apart from the sex." But I was like, I actually knew that was a genuine compliment because he doesn't give compliments unless they're genuine.
Yeah. Is that like a British thing? Or is that your Martin Hume thing?
I think it's a Martin Hume thing, but yeah, I appreciate it because somebody always said to me, it's like if you compliment somebody, don't just flatter them, actually say something genuine. So sometimes you have to stretch. It's like sometimes you're like, I really like that the belt you're wearing or something.
Well, it's funny because like I like trained myself to do that because of teaching. So when I was teaching martial arts, like one of the first things I would always have people do is like when I would train another person I wanted to teach, I would say like, all right, for the first month, you're only going to go up to the kids and find things that they're doing well. Because if you find something that somebody's doing well, you're going to get in the habit of doing that. And the methodology of teaching was always praise, correct, praise, or the compliment sandwich, as people would call it. So you would tell them something you're doing well, and then say something that they can work on, and then end it with, but this is also something you did well. So you start on a high note, give them that feedback, and then end on a high note. So I think that and I just started doing that like naturally in my life. And I kind of got away from that because I feel like I've grown into like a bit of a Scrooge lately, but I think overall I like to compliment people because then people feel good about it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's very. I know that I've always taken sort of criticism sometimes to heart, and even when you don't necessarily need to. So I think encouragement is good. I try and do that with my kids because it's like.
Yeah.
But then again, I do appreciate the fact that my parents are always on it, like blunt and honest.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny. So the show 100 Humans on Netflix, they had a thing on, do people respond better? Will somebody respond better to feedback that's positive or negative? So they had a task where they like taught people how to spin plates on a stick, and the whole thing was that like they had a guy who was the expert, and regardless of how they did, like one group he would tell them they did great, and then another group he would tell them they did terrible. And there was this one guy who was like phenomenal, and then he was in the like you have to tell him he did a shitty job group. And he told the guy, he was like, you did a really bad job. And the guy was so heartbroken. And then they were like, all right, come back and, do it again and see how long. The heuristic for seeing how well they did was like, how long can you keep the plate spinning on a stick? And the guy who did excellent drastically decreased. And all these other people that got positive reinforcement drastically increased. And so there is a method, it's proven based on that study that people do respond better to positive feedback. So that being said, let's give some positive feedback, hopefully, to Alementary Spotted Dog.
I know, they're like, we saw this YouTube video and it had our name on it, and all they've done is talk about martial arts.
Yeah. I always feel bad for like when we film, whoever like gets like towards the end of when we're filming, because that's when we like really start droning on. But yeah, so Alementary is a beer that I've had a couple of their stuff. I want to go visit them because they're in Hackensack. And I love puns. And the name Alementary is like the perfect pun. The first time I heard about them was, I was actually with you. We were at a beer tasting for my friend's bachelor party.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
You were nice enough to be our designated driver. And...
And then everyone else was like, no, I'm not going to be drinking today. And I was like...
You're like, what are you talking about?
But,
I remember, I said, I was like, I'm going to pay for him and he'll be the designated driver. And then they're like, he can't drink. And you're like, I'll pay for myself.
I obviously was very responsible about that.
No. Right, exactly. It was more funny because, like, you specifically were brought to, like, be our designated driver. And you were very responsible.
But
I'm not going to come to a beer festival and not drink. So
yeah. But yeah, no, I remember these guys. I always liked it. There was one, like, you have all these stupid one-liners in the James Bond films, and there was one where in Thunderball, where he goes to get a colonic irrigation. They call it, like, Alementary, my dear Bond, or something. And that was actually in the Ian Fleming book. It was, like, the only one-liner Ian Fleming ever wrote. It had something to do with enemas. But Alementary, this is definitely more my kind of thing. Spotted Dog, I like it as well. And it's a cream ale.
It is a cream ale. So apparently it's also a light craft beer, which I had never heard of before. So I had to look it up. And a white beer is an unfiltered top fermented, meaning that it's brewed at a slightly higher temperature than a bottom fermented beer. And it's also, they use a different, there's different yeast for a top fermented versus a bottom fermented. So ales typically have a top fermentation, and then lagers typically have bottom fermentation, and they use different yeast for that, for the differentiation of styles. And then also the style originated in Belgium during the Middle Ages and uses an unfiltered wheat as an adjunct, whereas German wheat beers use a malted wheat. And then again, I had to go down a rabbit hole. Malted wheat meaning that it's germinated to a certain point, and then unmalted meaning that it's just the raw seed of wheat.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was really happy that I went down this rabbit hole. I was like, wow, I'm learning so much about beer. It only took 4 years of Fe-Brew-Ary for us to finally, look into some of these terms.
I bought, there's this company called Fe-Brew-Ary where you can get yeast and, like, make your own alcohol, and I'm trying that. I've screwed it up twice, but then one of the beers we shall be one of my homegrown.
That would be awesome.
Right. Okay. So here we go.
Right. I already have mine poured.
Lovely golden colour. You know me, I love Belgian beer.
Yeah.
Oh, that is beautiful.
That makes sense to it.
Mmm. I've never tasted anything like it, really.
It's funny because I was like, oh, this tastes like every wheat beer I've ever had.
Well, I mean, I was expecting it to be like, well, wheat beer kind of has that wheaty, like,
right.
It's kind of understated on the wheatiness, and it's also not very, I thought it'd be sweet like a Belgian beer, but it's not quite, doesn't have that sweetness. It doesn't really.
My first thought was like, I don't think I could distinguish this between this and a Blue Moon. Maybe if I had them in tandem, I would.
No, I don't think I could either.
But I guess that's a compliment because people do like Blue Moon. And I think going back to something that we learned at a brewery where it was like, what would you recommend to people who, if you want to introduce somebody to a craft beer, what would you introduce them to? And it was like, don't start them off on an IPA. Don't start them off on a stout. Start them off on a lager.
Yeah.
And I think that this is also a nice transition because there are some of those macro breweries where it's like, okay, I'm going to start you off on a wheat beer, where like, it's like, if you like Blue Moon, you'll like this. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's good to like support your local breweries. If you live in New Jersey, very readily available. I wonder how it tastes with an orange.
It's definitely not unpleasant. It's just not.
No, and I think that's the thing is like a lot of times we get into these rabbit holes of like comparisons to things that are familiar, and I think it's more of just like a reference. And when I'm saying in this case like Blue Moon, I don't mean that in any pejorative manner. I mean that in like, if you like Blue Moon, you would really enjoy this. And it's a familiar taste. I like it.
I like it, and Blue Moon. I mean, the whole science of it is that drinkability thing, where it's like it's a beer you can drink a lot of without getting. So it takes a lot of effort to be that kind of like subtle.
Right. No, this is definitely a pretty. I think the other positive of this, the other really high point of this, is that there's not like an overpowering flavor. I think it's hard to like, there are certain beers that have a great flavor, but that also doesn't translate to like, you can drink that with anything.
Yeah.
Like, this is a beer that you can have with dinner regardless of what you're having. And I mean that in the best way possible. This is a great beer. I would have this with like an Indian food or like Mexican food, where you have like a lot of those like really powerful spices. This is like the perfect beer for that because there's no overpowering flavor. You still have the wheat that you can taste, but I feel like it goes well with with anything really.
I was just thinking it's like with spicy food, normally you have a lager or an island lager or something, which can get kind of like watery and bubbly and gassy, whereas this, it's just a little more depth to it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like this.
Yeah, I'm very good. Spotted dog. Why was it called Spotted Dog? Do you know that? It's got a little picture of the dog on there. I might have to email them and find out. And it says drinking for science. So,
yeah.
Clean, pale, golden beer for beer's sake. It does exactly what it says on the literal tin.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is a great. Like we said, I've had them a couple of times, and never disappointed. And again, not disappointed. This is a good beer.
Okay, good job. New Jersey represent. I don't know if I can get away with doing that. That's it.
Yeah.
What is the New Jersey sign? I don't really know if they have one.
I don't know. I remember when Mark and I worked at the school. Before I was the owner, we worked for somebody else, and we had a location in North Brunswick and South Brunswick, and we always had this really like a friendly rivalry of North and South. And I remember we would always do an N for North, and that was so. There's every once in a while I'll have a Facebook picture that pops up, and it'll be us doing an N sign, and I'm like, this is the worst gang sign. It's just 20-year-old white kids and teenagers just making signs.
So my Crofty at 9 years old made a snowman, and he was like,
yeah. I think I saw this meme this week of a snowman where the carrot and the eyes were on the bottom sphere of snow, and it was why are you getting mad? He's standing on his head, and I was like, that's perfect because I never would have thought of that. I've seen numerous people share that on social media this week, and I love it.
Right. I think this is very good. Okay. As a third day, and this is my father's birthday. Whereas he keeps saying he's closer to 90 now than 80, which is kind of
Is he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was just thinking with my kids how all of the stuff that you and I have experienced. We grew up without the internet, without cell phones, without stuff like that, and then it's he grew up without. He was born 1937, which is before jet planes, which is before television. Which I guess he took an ocean liner to Jamaica, and it's kind of you think what are our kids going to experience through the next 100 years? Is kind of crazy. So I'm quite happy to have a nice can of beer to celebrate the third.
Well, Alementary, my dear Roland.
Absolutely. Okay, we will see you on the 4th.